Hi, and welcome to another video on object-oriented programming in C#, with me, Marinus Toman. Okay, so in this video we're going to look at C# switch statements. So the switch statement is another selection statement similar to the if-else statements. So we use a switch statement to select when we want to select one of many blocks of code, so similar to the if-else ladder. And switch, this is basically how it works. This is the syntax here, so we have switch and then our boolean expression inside the brackets, and then we're going to have multiple different cases. So this is basically case x, so if this expression evaluated to x, then this block of code would execute. Same if it evaluated to y, then this block of code would execute. And then for every other, so this is basically our default, or the else block. So for every other case that fails, this one will just execute by default. So the switch expression is evaluated once. Okay, so we just go through this expression once. The value of the expression is compared with the values of each case. If there is a match, the associated block of code is executed. Otherwise, the default code block will execute. And we will look at the break and default keywords later. Okay, so just looking at a quick example. This example uses the weekday number to calculate or to convert it to the weekday name. So we're initializing day to value 4, and then we're just checking. So in our switch statement, what we can do is just can basically, a switch is good for checking patterns, as they're called in C#. But for us, what we care about is just, we're really going to use them just for checking integers, maybe characters, and maybe some strings. Okay, so that's really, we're just going to have either an integer, a character, or a string in our expression. So in this case, because we've got 7 days of the week, we can have 7 different cases. So case 1 would be Monday, case 5 Friday, and case 7 would be Sunday. Okay, so as you can see here, there is no default, so we can have a switch statement without the default block, but it's always good practice, you know, to put in a default block. So let's say, for example, if somebody put in the day number 8 here, then none of this code would execute. There'd be absolutely no block of code that executes. So it's always good practice to have a default block of code, you know, something that will execute regardless, even if it tells you that, you know, the execution is going wrong or something didn't work right. It's always better to have some kind of default block. Okay, so when C# reaches the break keyword, it breaks out of a switch block. So the break keyword also works for loops as well. Okay, so you can break out of basically any block of code that's executing. Once the compiler sees the break keyword, it's just going to stop all of what's executing inside this block of code, so inside the curly braces. And like I say, it works for anything inside any curly braces, so it'll be a switch, if-else statement, a for loop, a while loop, a do-while loop. So what it does is it just stops execution of more code within that block of code. And when a match is found, the job is done. As they say, it's time for a break. So in this example here, once we see that day has the number 4, the value 4 in it, then we can execute this line of code, and then we can just break straight out, because we don't need to check 5, 6 or 7 or anything else, because we've already found it. So it's just a waste of time executing, you know, going through and checking the rest of this code. We already found what we're looking for, so we just break straight out. Okay, so as they say here, a break can save a lot of execution time, because it basically ignores the execution of the rest of the code that follows the break statement in a switch block. Another thing about the switch is you can see that the cases, there's no curly brackets or anything after, it's just a colon, and then each line after the case statement will be executed as though it belonged to that case. And then basically a good practice is just to have a break statement at the end of every case. And then of course our default case will usually be at the end, so we don't really include a break statement there because it's already at the end. So as you can see here, default and then a break at the end. This more just for teaching purposes. You wouldn't do that in real life because once the code gets down to the default part, that it's at the end of the block of code anyway, so you're not saving much time by breaking out at this point. It's already finished. Okay, so looking at this example here, so using the default case, we can see that day is 4, so we don't have a case 4 here. So what's going to happen is it's basically going to check, is it a Saturday, is it 6 or 7, is it Saturday or Sunday, and if not, then just print out looking forward to the weekend. So you can see here, because it's not 6 or 7, it's just any other value other than 6 or 7 will print this out. Okay, so that's pretty much it, everything you need to know for a switch. If you're having problems, you can come over to Microsoft themselves, go through their selection statements, and again, I like going to Microsoft because they give you these little snippets of code and give you different examples. So you can see in this example here, they're using integers, they're using doubles. There's even other examples where they use characters and strings, and these different patterns as well. So you can go and look at patterns. Patterns are used in is expressions, switch statements, or switch expressions. So yeah, you can go and look at that stuff yourself, but basically that's as far as we need to know for the switch. So it's really when you're looking at your selection statements, you're going to either have the choice of using if else, an if else block or an if else ladder, or a switch. So there will be times when you want to use one over the other, and an example would be if you have a range of values. So if you're trying to search, let's say you're trying to find somebody that's a teenager, somebody that's between 13 and 19, well, a switch isn't going to work because this can either just be 13 or 19 or any of the values in between. So so it can only be one value. So if you're looking for a range of values, an if else is going to be your obvious choice there because a switch just can't handle ranges. Another example would be if you're trying to evaluate something that isn't a pattern, then a switch isn't going to be any good to you because as it says, switch statement uses patterns. So if you're trying to figure something else out, then you might want to use the if else as well. But the switch is good for things like when we're looking for a specific case, and when we just know we have a finite number of options that we want to go through. The switch block is pretty good for that. Okay, so that's everything. Okay, so that's everything for the video. Thanks for watching.